Hi guys, let's talk about gesture sculpture part 1. Our objectives are explore the concept of gesture in sculpture to develop expressive forms, analyze and compare works by Giacometti and Henry Moore to identify how gesture and abstraction communicate movement and emotion, and then create an experiment with foil maquette gestures sculptures to explore ideas for a final sculpture. So our overall project is going to create an expressive gesture sculpture. And then I have it needs the final layer, but we're going to be creating a sculpture like this that is a gesture that creates some sort of emotion. So our words worth knowing is a maquette. A maquette is a small three-dimensional model used by artists, especially sculptors and architects, to plan and test a larger piece of art before creating the final version. Think of a maquette as what sculptors do instead of sketches. So they also might do sketches, but they're going to create a small model of a larger piece, especially if someone's working in bronze, large-scale pottery, anything super large. You don't want to get into it. You want to kind of figure out the problems first in a smaller version. So the miniature models help artists visualize the proportions, form, and overall design, and it saves time and resources on the larger work. So those little foil maquettes down there are what we're going to start with first. So let's look at two artists that really have spent their lives studying form and gesture in their sculpture. So Giacometti, he was born in 1901, he died in 1966. He's a Swiss sculptor, painter, draftsman, printmaker, so man of many talents, and worked mostly in Paris. But he is one of the most important sculptors of the 20th century. He was influenced by Cubism, Surrealism, and devoted this deep analysis of figures in his work. So here's an example of him with his sculptures and some of his other forms. I want you to take a look at the surface texture. I want you to notice that they have a base. So in your sculpture, you need to think about whether you're going to create a base, how they're going to sit. And when discussing his work, he said he wanted to show just the essence of the person, not what they look like, just that essence. So the gesture, how the figure is posed, how they're activating space was the main emotional language. So here's another example. And all of his figures seem to be frozen in time, almost like they're about ready to do something. They're on a mission. They're going somewhere. And then you can see him in his studio, and he also would make a lot of maquettes before he would go on to cast any of these in bronze. And then you can see, especially with that one in the middle, that pose that just falls over. So he's trying to give you that emotion just in the pose, not focused on realistic proportions. And I love that little cat one up there. And again, think about the base, whether like the ones on the left, they do not need a base. The ones on the right all have a very well-designed base that fits with the sculpture. Our second artist is Henry Moore. He was born in 1898, died in 1986. An English visual artist best known for his semi-abstract monumental bronze sculptures. These are all over the world. They're very popular. One of the most important British artists of the 20th century, another very celebrated sculptor. And like I said, renowned for his semi-abstract bronze sculptures. These are all over the world. So he's focusing on movement and gesture through posture. So poses, not necessarily them in action or moving. So how a body curves on something or leans on something or how it interacts with the space. So here's a nice little sculpture of a family. There's him in his studio. He also would make lots of maquettes before he would move on to a very large scale sculpture. And he also used this positive and balance of positive and negative space. These openings in his sculpture could suggest vulnerability, connection. I just love how he's activating negative space in sculpture. He's not just thinking about the positive. So a couple more examples. And then you also, like I said before, need to think about in your own sculpture whether it needs a base and what type of base is appropriate. So in some of his sculptures that are indoor sculptures, there's specific platforms that he makes for them. Whereas some of the ones that are outdoors have a base, some of them are resting on the ground. So you really also need to think about the base as part of your sculpture. All right, so making your foil gesture maquette. These steps are using your gesture drawings that you've created. You need to choose at least one is bare minimum, to make a maquette. You're going to create a small cardboard base to glue your sculpture. You can paint that a color if you like. If you want to boost it up to the next level, I would create a series of multiple sculptures to explore final options for your final sculpture. So you're not just doing one and then making one final sculpture. When you need to sketch, you need to really explore what kind of poses, gestures you want to use. If you want to take it up another level, create a group of sculptures that interact with one another on a base. And then you can also dry brush some black paint over the foil to add a little bit of interest and texture. So you have a range of options to explore making a maquette, hopefully maquettes. I have a bunch of examples in class. I'll also have some demos in class and some videos on ways to make the sculpture, and I cannot wait to see what you come up with. So this is our step one before we move on to making our larger sculptures. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with.